Afternoon, everybody. Ty here. Hope everybody is doing well. And I know in recent time we've been talking about how busy the weather pattern is going to get, but let's take a moment to appreciate what we have here right now. For the most part, this is the picture over the lower 48, and it's pretty quiet. There is, of course, some shower and a little bit of frozen precip mixed in over here towards Maine. We have some winter weather going on over towards the northwest, especially towards the higher elevations right now. We'll expect that to actually increase in intensity and coverage as we go further along here. And we could see a little bit more action over here towards Maine. But for the most part, this is going to be just one of those cold, raw, rainy days with a little bit of sleet and maybe a little ice mixed in. Not expecting anything major from that. But outside of that, nothing major going on. Severe weather, no watches or warnings or anything of the like. We don't have any hurricanes that we're keeping a close eye on that are an immediate threat to the lower 48, I should say. We, of course, have Sarah over here, but that's looking like it's going to probably fizzle out over Mexico at this current point in time. Of course, we'll still make an update on that, and that'll be coming at the end of this weekend. But in the short term right now, at least over the next 24 to 48 hours, wouldn't be expecting much in the way of significant weather. However, as we go further along here, if you look towards the top right-hand corner, and see our SPC outlook, where we have a slight risk in play. This is going to, of course, be mainly a Texas event. We can't disinclude Oklahoma, though, at this point. And the same will persist in the following day. This will be Monday, where we're looking at potential for a continuation of that severe weather. Really, for the most part, it's going to be a continuation of Sunday's dynamics, or I would more or less say remnants of them. There is a conditional threat that we may see an expansion of this outlook a little bit further off to maybe the north and east a little bit. So again, Oklahoma still watching you pretty closely, maybe towards East Oklahoma and eastern Texas as well. Beyond that point, though, we still have to keep our eyes open for day 5 and 6, where severe weather potential does exist with that as well. On day 7 and 8, we do start to get a little bit of a reprieve there. But severe weather is not the only thing that we're watching. We also have winter weather in the cards as well. As you can see here on each of these days, this is within the next 3 days. There is very good probability of snowfall reaching above an inch or more easily over towards the northwest. This is already a sign. This is really more or less, I would say, a sign of things to come here as we go further along. And then as we get even further down the line, the chances of snow increase. And then also, I'm going to be watching for a little bit of a lake effect event as we get closer to the Thanksgiving holiday as well. So a lot to keep track of in the short term here. So make sure you have that notification bell on. Make sure you're hitting that like button and that subscribe button as well. So this is a look at the model data that we have ahead here. And an important trinket that I want to add in now, and this is going to be a thing in future videos. The Euro model has actually been updated to where we can now look at 360 hours in advance here. GFS goes to 384, so now we get 15 days where we can actually look at 2 models. So maybe this will help with some of the confidence in the medium to longer range forecast here. But that being said here, we can get a good model comparison for about 2 weeks in advance now. Still kind of more or less call things here, say once you get past the 5-day mark though still. But in any case though, looking at both of these, we're going to start out really with that Sunday setup of severe weather. You can see this trough kind of digging real deep, actually going below the US border here. But this is what's going to help set the stage for our severe weather threat. It's going to be on the upslope of this trough here where we get our storms to fire here. So I would expect a northeast motion mostly from these storms. I don't expect much in the way of tornadoes, mainly due to the directional wind shear more so than anything else right now. There's going to be some southerly winds or maybe some southwesterly wind to come into play here, but I just don't think it's going to come together at the right time in order to get significant amount of tornadoes, I should say. I do think tornadoes are still possible, but the setups on Sunday and Monday are not going to be incredible, I'll put it that way, but still very much a possible tornado threat. Really still thinking damaging winds, hail's also possible with this, and even then, there still could be a sneaky severe thunderstorm or 2 over towards the Midwest over the course of the next couple of days here. As this goes further along, we see this trough start to fall apart, and then we set the stage for the next one to follow right here. And this is where the big cool down comes into play for the eastern US here. You can see this really deep low right here starting to develop here. You can actually even see the 540 line on the screen. I'm actually going to circle it for you. That is our 32-degree line. So anything that is north of this line right here at this point, and the numbers are kind of dropping from this point, are below freezing at this point. So any sort of moisture that comes into play here, we could get some snow, and at times it could even be heavy depending on the moisture content for this area. But in any case though, Euro's kind of showing the same thing as the GFS at this point, as you can see in the bottom left corner. As we continue to move forward, we'll see this cold air actually lingering for a while here. It isn't really going to go away, I would say, until really the end of this week before Thanksgiving here. And then after that, we're going to see a nice little ridge come into play. And I think this also could potentially set the stage for maybe a small scale flooding event, maybe a severe weather event, if this does indeed verify. Keep in mind, we're 312 hours out at this point, so can't put a whole lot of merit into that. But I do think that this may very well set the stage for a severe weather event towards the southeast. Dixie Alley's been very quiet, and second season is usually mostly oriented towards Dixie Alley, not so much the plains, but it's kind of been a little bit of the inverse. So I'm going to definitely be keeping an eye on things. As a whole here, as we get towards the start of December, it even looks like the storm track kind of shifts a bit north once again. And we're struggling to kind of get that cold air to make its way back down here. We'll verify that more by next week, because by that point we'll be able to start to get a look at what December looks like. But could be a pretty warm start for a lot of us in the lower 48 here. So going further along here, we're going to go ahead and switch over to the moisture content here. We're going to be taking a look at our dew points here. And just from looking at the direction of this, like I said, there is some southwesterly flow here, which is important for that severe weather setup. But the moisture amount, those 60-degree plus dew points, we will want them to be a little bit further to the west here, but even so, it's still sufficient enough being in the mid-50s. But this kind of takes the look of a little bit more of a cold core setup than anything else. It's kind of interesting how everything is going to set up as a result of this. But as a whole here, parameters are still sufficient enough for severe weather. Really, my question for Monday is just how do these hold up as we get later into the early afternoon, maybe mid-afternoon, before all is said and done. And that really will depend a lot on just how much remnant instability will be left over with this system. We still have a decent amount of moisture here. In fact, I would dare say the moisture looks a little bit better on Monday, but kinematically speaking, this setup, as we've just looked at it, isn't all that great. There is still, that trough is starting to weaken at this point, but it's still very strong. So like I said, very much a wild card at this point as to how Monday could pan out. But as we go further along here, once we see that big trough come in around the 20th and beyond here, that moisture gets kicked out, and we don't really have too many opportunities for severe weather in the short term here. So we go further along, we start to see some moisture sneak back into the southern plains here. Eventually this gets pushed off to the east and off to the north a bit. Depending on how these moisture returns may uptrend or downtrend could determine how severe weather pans out as we get towards the end of the month and maybe even towards the start of December here. So looking at the lightning flash density to kind of help verify things along with our mixed layer cape here, interesting signals kind of pop up here with the Euro more so than anything else. But as you can see here, as we get towards maybe Sunday evening, I would say, a little further off to the east here, we have slightly better mixed layer readings, but I think a lot of the storm development is going to be a little further off to the west. So like I said, it's really a matter of timing. It's still very much a conditional threat, but we'll have to keep an eye on things and see how it goes. We're almost in range of convective models now, so it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. Do have a little bit of remnant instability left over towards maybe eastern Texas, and that's why I'm not really willing to write off the Monday setup just yet. I do think there are some things working against it, but where that moisture kind of pops up is in a very similar place as where we're seeing this signal or that little pop-up of a mixed layer cape. So we can get everything to kind of mix well together here, then we might be in business in regards to severe weather there. But I don't expect that to be a long duration event. As we go further along here, we have remnant instability, but I just don't think the other parameters are really going to be in such abundance or in such a manner to really help fuel severe weather beyond that point. From that point and onward here, wouldn't expect much in the way of activity until we get past the 24th. See, just like we talked about earlier, towards the 25th, we saw the moisture return in that last map here, and then here's the instability corresponding with that. So kind of interested to see how that pans out. Like I said, as far out as we are, can't really put a lot of merit into it, but it's interesting as we go further along here, depending on how that moisture return pans out along with this, what I'm seeing here definitely kind of piques my curiosity here as we go further along, and then even have a little bit of remnant instability over towards Florida before all is said and done. Do I think that that will be associated with a severe weather setup? Kind of leaning towards no, but we did see a little feature towards the end of that model run as well. Of course, these are really more or less shots into the dark at this point here. It's pretty cool to be able to go that far with the Euro, by the way. Being able to go 360 hours is nice. Just had to put that in there. Shout out to everyone that works on the European model. As we go further along here, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the GFS here again with the temperatures, and we'll have the troughing, or the 500 millibar map where we've been looking at all the troughs on the bottom left corner here. Kind of coincides with what we're talking about here. And we're just really going to skip along all the way to the 20th here, where we start to see that trough come in. Now look at this. Look at how all this cold air just starts rushing towards the south. And it's not immediate, but lo and behold, look at how those 30s start to spread out as we get towards the 21st into the 22nd. And it really starts to come together as we get towards the 24th. After this point, though, it looks like it kicks out. It gets kicked out from there. And while we're still going to be anticipating some cold mornings beyond that point, eventually with that ridging coming into play, we're going to start to see that increase in temperatures. And like I said, it's where we have these two air masses kind of colliding with each other as we get towards the end of the month that kind of leaves me with question marks in regards to that severe weather potential. So like I said, a lot still yet to be determined, but a lot that I'm definitely going to be keeping an extra close eye on as we go further along here. In either case, though, it looks like we're going to be pretty busy here on the channel. So typically at this part of the video, we will usually go ahead and go over the precipitation forecast here and then call it. But considering the fact that we have such a prominent threat of winter weather as well, especially over towards the Great Lakes states, as we go further along, we'll go over the snowfall totals, maybe the rainfall totals, but I think there is a conditional flash flood threat as we go further along. In particular, I'm interested in this area over towards the Midwest maybe. As you can see, there's not really much in the way of cold air mixing with this, so we're going to have cold rain, but it's going to be a very steady rain at that. Of course, we still have to make note of our severe weather potential as we go into Sunday evening, overnight Sunday, and then even into Monday. That line actually holds up pretty well according to GFS, so again, if you're over towards maybe eastern Texas, eastern Oklahoma, and maybe even western Arkansas, you might need to keep an eye out for potential for severe storms. Not the greatest potential I've ever seen, but there is some potential nonetheless. So go further along here as we get towards the 20th. This is where the game really starts to change here. This is where we start to see that cold air coming into play here. And wherever that remnant moisture is behind this 540 line comes into play, we may see a little bit of a changeover from rain to snow here. This also will inevitably get that lake effect machine going. So lake effect snow is going to come into play. And then as we go further along here, we'll see our next system coming in towards the end of this model run here. See a little sneaky low pop up over here towards Texas, and this may kickstart more potential for severe weather as we get towards the end of the month as well. So Thanksgiving could be pretty busy. The days after, actually it looks like it's going to be relatively calm. The storm track itself really looks like it starts to shift further up towards the north as we get towards the very end of the month, and maybe even into the start of December. So last few days may start to get quiet towards the very, and I mean like the very end of November heading into December here. But keep in mind, things change pretty quickly with the weather, and we're looking 16 days into the future at this point. A lot can happen. But in any case, though, last thing we're going to go ahead and do is take a look at what our snowfall totals could be like over the lower 48. Main points of interest, as I mentioned before, really going to be more so over towards the northwest and, of course, the Great Lakes. You can see pretty big-time some big-time snow totals. Can't speak to save my life. Over here towards, of course, Washington and Oregon, also towards Idaho. A lot of snowfall expected there. That's really no surprise. It's about on schedule, I would say. Rockies start to get into the action here. Even starting to see a little bit of North Dakota getting into the mix here. But watch what happens as we're now past that 20th time frame here. Watch all of the snowfall that we're seeing over towards the Great Lakes. So Lake Michigan, particularly Lake Erie and Lake Toronto look like the points of interest as we go further along here. We could see some major snowfall totals here. It's not uncommon to see that with the lake effect machine, but sometimes we end up seeing it start a little bit later. I would say after Thanksgiving is usually when I would expect to see the lake effect machine come into play here. But it really looks like over towards Erie is the point of interest right now. And then, of course, as we get towards the end of the model run here, we start to kind of calm down with the snowfall. In the short term, I should say, at least. But we'll have to see how things pan out here. I'll also go ahead and take a quick look at rainfall totals as well before we head up out of here. This is, of course, going by the 5-day basis here. Even then, rainfall totals are not too crazy right now. I would say mainly over towards Iowa and Wisconsin seem to be a point of interest. Now, the further north we go, we also have to keep in mind this is showing quantitative precipitation, so there's always a chance that we could see a little bit of mix of snowfall totals in here as well. As you can see it a little bit more clearly over here towards the Ohio Valley here and over towards Lake Erie, as we've mentioned before. Same thing with the northwest here. Now, this next setup over here that we're keeping an eye on over towards Texas kind of piques my interest. But of course, being 324 hours out, I'm not going to put a lot of value into these totals here. But some pretty notable rainfall looks like it comes into play over here towards Texas. And then, of course, we may have to watch Florida as well. Not expecting anything tropical by any means right now, but we still have to keep an eye out for any sort of low pressure systems because they will inevitably, of course, bring some rainfall into the equation. But that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this video. You found it useful. If you did, make sure you're smashing the like button. Again, decimating that subscribe button and obliterating that share button. I'll see you guys in the next video. Make sure you have that notification bell on so that way you can catch it. Till then, have an awesome rest of your day.